So in the last session, we have discussed about one of the important concepts in OOPS, object-oriented programming, encapsulation. Right? Before that, we understood polymorphism, method overloading in that, and then we understood encapsulation. Right? And in this session, we'll discuss about inheritance, another important object-oriented programming concept called inheritance. So what is inheritance? Inheritance is acquiring the properties and behavior of one class by another class is inheritance. So acquiring the properties, that is variables, and behavior, that is methods, of one class by another class is called as inheritance. So we do have some properties, that is variables, and behaviors, methods. So that will be acquired by another class. So that we call it as inheritance. So for example, say for example, this is one class and this is another class. See, this is class one, this is class two. So acquiring in the sense, so whatever methods and variables we have in C1. So if C2 is inheriting C1 means C2 will get the visibility of methods and variables defined in C1 as well. So we can have some variables and methods here, right, in C1. So that will be inherited by C2 as well. So we use extends keyword here for that. So for C2 to extend C1, we can say we can use extends keyword. So C2 extends C1 in the sense we get methods and variables. So variables and methods in C1 will be acquired, will be acquired in the sense will also be visible to C2 when C2 extend C1. C1 stands here for class 1, just an example. Say C2 is our class 2. So when do we say class 2 is extending C1? Is when C2 is acquiring the properties and behaviors, that is variables and methods of C1, then we say C2 is inheriting C1, right? So inheriting in the sense acquiring the properties and behavior, that is acquiring the methods and variables of C1 by C2 is called as inheritance. So inheritance involves at least two classes. So till now encapsulation, polymorphism. So to achieve those object-oriented programming concepts, we can achieve them or we can apply those concepts on single class. We can apply them on the single class here. But coming to inheritance, so we need at least two classes to achieve inheritance. So this is about inheritance definition. Now let us see what are the types of inheritance we have. So we do have four types of inheritance: single inheritance, multi-level inheritance, hierarchical, and multiple inheritance. So what is single inheritance? Whatever we are seeing here, C1 extending C2. So single inheritance involves only two classes. There will be a parent class, there will be a subclass. So a class which has the properties and behavior defined once. So, and then the class which is actually extending or acquiring the properties of the first class or the parent class. So we call this class as parent class. The class which has the properties are called parent class or super class or base class. The one which is extending the properties of the class is called as child class, or this is also called as superclass, subclass, and base class, derived class. So why do we need to inherit, first of all, right? So say, for example, I have some, you know, I have a class, right? Say, for example, this is a loan class, right? So loan might have, or let's take some, you know, yeah, let's take loan as an example, right? So loan, say for example, I have a class called loan, right? So loan might have some loan ID, right? Again, like its own some policies, right? Like this. And say for example, we do have some other classes, like, so this is my personal loan. There could be personal loan, and there could be home loan, and there could be vehicle loan, right? Like this, we can have other loan, like loans, right? Loan divisions, right? So, but all these loans will have in common loan ID and some policies, right? Of the general policies while taking the loan, like you have to have some surety, like that, right? So those members will be defined once in the parent class. So in the parent class, we will define variables and methods which are common to all these classes. We will define it once in parent class or one class, right? And what we are going to do is we are going to acquire these properties. So these properties will be acquired, right, by all the other classes. So personal loan class will definitely need the loan ID and policies as well, right? Same is the case for home loan. Same is the case for vehicle loan. And also personal loan might have, in this case, so its own policies, right? So personal loan might have the same policies, its own policies as well, along with the general policies, and it might have its own rate of interest, right? So same is the case for home loan and other loans as well, right? Vehicle loan as well. So in this case, we are not defining the general ones, general variables and general methods. We are not going to define them again and again. So we defined it once in a class, and we are gonna inherit them to the child classes. So this we call it as parent class, where we have the common variables and methods. And these common variables and methods we can inherit to the other classes called child classes. So you can see here in this example, personal home loan, vehicle loan, right? So these loans can be like inherit the loan class here, right? Which can acquire loan ID policy. So you don't need to define them again. So you don't need to define them in each class, right? So this actually saves, lot of memory, right? So this is actually resolving the problem of redundancy, right? So code reusability is the huge benefit here, right? I'm just taking an example of three classes. Say, for example, there could be some other loans, right? So where, we can use this class, right? In this example, like that, you create one class, which is a common class. Say, for example, there can be a person class, right? The person will have a name definitely, and will have an age. So these two are common for a person. So I'll have a one person class and have my, two variables, name and age, and a method to display name and one other methods. So we can have some getters and setters for name and age, right? So we learned that now, getters and setters in while we are discussing about encapsulation. So like that, we can have one person class, right? So one person class, and then, you know, uh, we can have one person class, and then, say for example, I can have one person class, which will have some name and age, right? So, or let me take another page and explain. So you can have some person class. Say for example, this is person, which might have some name and age, which are very common, right? For any person. And now what we are going to do, we are going to have another classes where, say, this is employee, this is student, right? Employee can be one, uh, one class, student, right? And we can have maybe business, homemaker, senior citizen, like this, right? All these are also persons and which will have same name and age. So we don't need to repeat these variables or methods in each of these classes. Instead, what we can do is we can inherit it, we can define it in one class and we can inherit from those classes, right? So like this. So all using extends keyword. So when we wanted to use the inheritance, we use the concept, we use the keyword called extends. So class employee is extending person class, meaning employee will also acquire the properties and methods of person class here, name and age. Along with it, so employee might have its own variables as well, right? But once the child class acquires the properties of parent class, all the parent class properties and methods are also visible to employee, can directly access those properties and methods or variables and methods, right? So here in this case, student might have its own student ID, right? Same is the case like, so they might have something like GST or something related to business, right? So like this, we can have, we can, like the normal classes, we can define its own variables, but the common properties, common variables and methods, we can have it in one class and can inherit those class. We can inherit the common class properties to the all the subclasses or derived class or child class. We can see here the association. So when we say, hmm, so when we say parent class, so we say child class, the corresponding child class. When we say super class, when we will call the child class a subclass. When we say base class, we will say derived class, right? So this is the association. So usually we will use parent class and child class as the terminology, but you have to remember all these as well. So people also call it like this, right? So when they say super class, you need to consider that as a parent class. When we say base class, it should be considered as a parent class, right? Subclass and derived class should be treated it as child class, right? So this is the concept of inheritance, right? So what's the huge benefit of this? Code reusability. Code reusability is the great benefit of inheritance, right? So you define it once, the properties and methods which are common are defined once in the class, and those can be extended. So or those can be inherited using a keyword called extends by multiple classes, right? So we'll see what are the types of inheritance. So we have already seen single inheritance here, right? So this is single inheritance, meaning we will have one parent class, one child class extending parent class, meaning all the properties and variables defined in this parent class will be acquired by class C2, right? This is what we call it as a single inheritance. So single inheritance. So if I have class called C1 and class C2, and if class C2 is extending class C1, so how do we represent that is like this, meaning class 2 is extending class 1 is what this representation means, or class 2 is inheriting class 1, right? This is single inheritance. So remember, this is single inheritance. Now, what is the next type? That is multi-level. So this is single inheritance, and we do have multi-level inheritance. So what is multi-level inheritance? Say for example, you have C1, you have C2, C1, C2 will acquire C1 properties. So we have C1, we have C2. C2 is inheriting C1. Fine, right? Till here we know. And C2, C3 will be another class which will be inheriting C2. So in that case, what happens? Like C3 will know the properties or will acquire the properties of C2 as well, right? C3 will have its own properties and methods. Along with that, it will also have, it will also acquire, it will also acquire the properties of C2 as C3 is inheriting, C3 in the sense class 3 here, right? So class 3 is inheriting class 2. So C3 will acquire the properties and methods of C2 as well. But what happened earlier? C2 was inheriting C1. So C2 might already get the C1 properties and methods, right? So indirectly, C3 has now the properties and methods of both C2 directly and indirectly C1, right? So C3 here will have like, so C2 here is C2 plus C1, right? So here class 3 will be class 3. Anyway, class 3 will have its own properties and also C2 and C1. So this we call it as multiple inheritance. We call this as multiple inheritance. Multi-level, sorry. This is multi-level. This is multi-level. Next comes hierarchical. Hierarchical inheritance. So what is hierarchical inheritance? In hierarchical inheritance, we'll be having one parent class. So you'll be having one parent class and multiple child classes, like what we have seen in person and loan example, right? So you'll be having like this. So how do you represent that is from child class to parent class like this, meaning child, so child class is acquiring properties of parent class. So here we do have one parent class, multiple child class. So multiple child classes acquiring the properties of one parent class. So one only in hierarchical inheritance. So what happens? We do have one parent class and multiple child classes. So this is third type. And we do have another type. So where we call that as multiple inheritance. So in multiple inheritance, what happens is we'll have multiple parents and we'll have one child class. So this could be even more than one, right? So like hierarchical, we have three children, right? This could have more than one child, more than three childs as well in this case, right? So likewise, multiple inheritance will have more than one class, more than two classes, and all these classes will be inherited by one child class. This is what we call it as multiple inheritance. We have three parent, more than one parent class. So like this, and then this will be inherited by parent child class, right? This is what we call it as multiple inheritance. So we call this as multiple inheritance. And multiple inheritance is not supported by inheritance. So this is multiple inheritance, but multiple inheritance is not supported by Java. So we'll see why it is not supported later, but it is not supported by Java with the classes. But multiple inheritance we can achieve through interfaces. There is a concept called interfaces. We will achieve multiple inheritance through interfaces in Java. but using classes in multiple inheritance is not supported. This is multiple inheritance. So which is not supported. Which is not supported by using classes, it's not supported. But using interfaces, it is supported. Like for example, we can have multiple interfaces. I1 is one interface, I2 might be another interface, I3 is another interface. And we can have one child class which can acquire all these interfaces. So multiple inheritance is not supported using classes, but multiple inheritance can be achieved through interfaces. This can be achieved through interfaces. So we'll learn this about this interfaces concept in the next sessions. But for now, you need to remember that. So in multiple inheritance is not supported in Java using the classes, but we can achieve multiple inheritance using interfaces, right? So we are going to discuss about three types of inheritance now using the classes: single inheritance, right? And multi-level inheritance and hierarchical inheritance now, right? So let's understand this all these types of inheritance with examples. So for today, I'll create a new package. I'll call it as create 14. I'll just call it as single inheritance demo or just single demo. Call it a single inheritance demo. Now observe carefully. We can define more than one class in one file, in one .java file. Till now, what we used to do, we used to actually have the single class, right? So when we give the file name, when we create a class, so we will have a class name, and with the same name, file name used to save it as class name.java, right? So we can even create more than one class in one file, and the main class, like the whatever the name we have for the file, for the Java class file. So that file name, that class name, whatever use, wherever you use that class name, that class has to be public. So public is an access modifier. So we'll come to this, but only we'll have one public class in a file, right? So all the other classes can be non-public classes. So say for example, we have class A. I have some variable called int A. Like I have a variable called A, which is of type integer, right? Say for example, I have something called display method, where we will just say I'm in class A, and we'll just display the value of A, right? So in the same way, like I can have class B, which is extending class A. So this is what I was referring to. So class B here is extending A, meaning so class B is gonna acquire the properties of class A. That is A and display will also be present in B as well. That's what we mean by extends keyword. Extends actually inherits the properties of the parent class. Here parent class is A, child class is B. So again, B will have its own properties. And we can say I'm in class B, and the value will just display the value of B here. So A here is child class, B is parent, A is parent class, B is child class, which is inheriting the properties of child class A, right? Now, how do we call this? How do we call these methods? So we can have one main method. So we always need a main method to create the objects, right? So we do have two classes. These are like any other classes, but class B is extending class A, meaning class B is inheriting the properties of class A. So B is called as parent class, A is called as child class, right? So sorry, A is parent class and B is child class, right? So B is inheriting the properties of A class. All right, now what does that mean? We'll see that in action now. So I'm gonna create an object for, or let's see, for example, I'm gonna create an object for A object equal to, so this is object A object in the sense A is a class and object. We are creating an object for class A, right? Now observe. So A object dot A, I'll just say as 10, and I'll just say A object dot A, and also, or what we can do is we can directly call the method dot. We do have some method called display, right? Which we define. So we can define that method. Yeah. Instead of this, what we can do is we'll just call the method display, right? So if we run this method, we know what happens, right? So A, just imagine we do have only class A. What happens? We have a class variable A, and we have some method called display. So how do we access this? So we can access by creating an object for class A. So that's what we did here. So we assign a number to A, and then we are calling the method called display, which is present in class A, right? So this we already know. Now what we are going to do is we are going to create an object of our B class. B object equal to new of B, which creates an object for B class. Now observe. So B object, when I say B object dot, so observe now. So what are all the variables accessible? Actually, B class has only variable B and a method called show. But if you observe here, so it says we can access A and B. And also you can see B only has show method we define, but it is also allowing us to select display method as well, right? So we can select, A as well as B. So say for example, I can assign A like this, even though A is not present, right? A is not present in object B, we can assign it something like that. And then B object dot B. B is anyway the variable which we defined in class B, right? So this is fine. Now, B object dot, so display is the method which is defined in A, if you observe, but still we are able to access it, right? So this is because B has actually extending the class A. We can access show anyway, because show is the method which is defined in class B, right? So this is nothing new. B also we can access because B and show are the variables and the methods defined in class B. So this is nothing new, show and B, right? But if you observe, we are able to access variable A and display method, which are of class A. So this is because class B is extending class A, right? Now observe. So we can clearly see that in class A 10 and in class B 20, right? So this means that we are able to access both the methods, right? Method which is in class A, method which is in class B, right? So using the object created using B, right? Only we created one object, but we are able to call the methods of class A as well, and we are able to access the variables of class A. So which means that like whenever we have an requirement of having the properties A and display here by B, right? So if B also needs these methods and these variables, then we can just use the keyword called extends, and we can write we can extend the class A, right? So we can child class will be extending the parent class. So in that sense, like it will acquire these properties. B will have the visibility of properties and methods defined in parent class, as B is the child class here, right? That we have seen as an example here, right? So, and B can have its own variables and methods again, like any other class. But using extends keyword, we can inherit the already defined properties and methods by the parent class. So this is an example on single inheritance, right? So now let me show you another example. Another example on single inheritance. Say for example, we have a class called employee. I have a class called employee. And employee might have some name, right? So say for example, I'll call it as some name. Employee has some name, and then employee will have some employee ID. Will have its own method, right? Employee will work. So we'll just say work, and we'll say employee is working, right? This is one class. Now I wanted to define another class where this is my subclass, which I wanted to extend the, the superclass, right? Extends employee. Manager is a class which is extending employee. Likewise, we can define any other class as well, like developer, any other role as well, right? So, but each employee will have its own department, right? So that's what we define. And manager will, what's the work of manager? Manager actually manages the work, right? He's managing the department, right? So we do have two classes, employee class, which has employee will have the common properties, which are name and employee ID. Every employee will have a name. Every employee will have the employee ID, right? So we know that. Now, every employee will work, right? So that's the reason we have created one method here. Now, manager is one type of an employee, right? So is one type of an employee, which is extending employee, because every employee will have the name and employee ID, right? So we don't want to define it again in the manager class. Instead, we will inherit the properties of employee class, so that these two variables will also be visible to class manager, even though we did not define it specifically explicitly in manager class, right? And even manager can access the method called work, right? So even though we don't have it here, so manager will have the visibility of all these properties, as class manager here is extending employee class, right? Manager here is a child class, employee here is a parent class, or super class, subclass, right? So yeah, that's the terminology. And we can say manager has its own, like this class has its own variables and its own methods, right? So now let's go to the main method, and let's create the object for manager directly. So I'll just say manager can be equal to new manager. Now you can access manager name, m dot name. So this will be the inherited one, inherited variable. So if you observe, we didn't have the name here, name in the manager, right? So we are still able to access it because manager has acquired the properties of employee, right? So in the same way, like let's actually display employee ID. So even employee ID is not present in manager, but still we are able to access it using the object manager object, right? Department, anyway, it's defined within the manager class. So this we know, we can access it using the object that we did, right? So this is also inherited variable, employee ID. So this is the actual its own its own variable. It can even call the method of from the employee. So this is not its own method, but it's been inherited method from employee. It has its own method manager called manage, right? So this is a method from the direct manager its own subclass, right? Method from manager, right? Now let us execute this. So you can see name, employee ID, department, and also two methods have been called here. Work method, which is defined in employee table, right? So we have just used the variable here. What our name here? We are just using the variable here, or object, string object here, right? Is working, is managing the sales department, right? So what did we achieve here? So we created one class and we are actually acquiring the same properties to the another class. So which actually has the which where we are achieving the code reusability. We didn't define this again and again, right? So we define it in one class and we are actually getting those properties in another class. This is what we call as code reusability, right? And this is about the single inheritance, where we had one child class, one parent class, and one child class, right? So this is all about single inheritance. Now let us see about the second type. So second type of inheritance called multi-level inheritance. So in multi-level inheritance, we do have the chain, like one parent class, child class, and then subchild, again subchild, like that, right? So let's see that. Let's understand with an example. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use the same one. We'll just change the name for it and we'll add one more class to it. Multi-level inheritance. This is multi-level inheritance. And within one package, we can't have the same class name. So day 14 is one package, right? So within that, you can have n number of classes, but all the class names has to be unique. So we already has this class name A defined in single inheritance demo, right? So that's the reason it is not allowing us. So let's call this as A1 and B1, and B1 is extending A1, right? So within the same package, we can't have uh, a class with the same name to the same class name. We can't have it for more than one class, right? So all the classes names within the package has to be unique. So that's the reason it was not allowing. So I just renamed it to A1 and B1, right? So now, so what is multi-level? We can have more than one child, it's like a chain. Let me show you. We can have one like this. We can have a number of classes. So one this class will inherit the properties of the parent class, and this will inherit its parent, like this, right? So this class we can call it as a parent class, and this class will be the its child class, and C3 will be the child class of C2. C4 will be the child class of C3, like that. So in this case, this we call it as multi-level inheritance. In this case, C2 will acquire the properties of C1. C3 will access the properties of C2, meaning indirectly we will get the access of C1 as well. So C4 is another class which is acquiring the properties of C3. So indirectly it will get the access to C2 and C1 as well. So this is what we call it as multi-level, right? So this we are going to achieve now. So on that, we are seeing a demo. I have a class A1 as class B1 as well. And now I'll define a class called class C1 as well. So I'll just say class C1, or we can even say class C, which is extending B1, right? Now I'll just say it as print method and will have its own variable C, and we are in class C, we'll display the variable name. So this is what we called as multi-level inheritance. So in this example, we are having only C1, C2, and C3, right? We can even have C4 as well. So you can define class, something called class D, and you can extend class C. Okay, just for consistency, let's name it as C1 as. Okay, A1, B1, C1, right? So if you observe, B1 is extending A1. So in this case, what happens? B1 becomes child class, A1 is its parent class. But if you see here, C1 is extending B1. So in this case, C1 will be the child class and B1 will be its parent class, right? And it will have its own variables and methods. Now, let's come here. So let me comment this. And now we'll have an object of C. This will be the C1 actually, right? Now, C object dot, we can access all the variables now, right? C object, C, observe, it has access to A, B, and C. So if you see here in the class C, C1, so we had only C defined, right? And print method. So usually it will have access only to C and print. But now if you observe, it has access to A, B, and C. And also it has access to display, it has access to show method and print method, right? So this is because C1 is inheriting B1, right? So C opt dot B. So we can assign the values to all the variables as we are able to access all the variables A, B, and C as well along with C. As C class is C1 class is inheriting B1, right? B1 is inheriting A1 as well, right? Multi-level. Same way, we can access method names as well. Display, show method. Show method, if you observe, it's there in B class or B1 class, right? Print method. Yeah, we are able to see the right output, right? So using these three methods, display, show, and print, right? So this is what we call it as multi-level inheritance, where we have, one parent, one child. Again, like it's like a chain, it's like a levels, right? So one parent, one child. Again, we'll have another child which will be inheriting the earlier child, or we can say it as grandchild. And again, we can have great grandchild, which will be inheriting the grandchild, like that, and so on, right? So that we call it as multi-level, and we have seen only three levels here, right? One level, right? A1 in B1 inheriting A1 and C1 inheriting B1, and you can have it n number of levels here. Like D1 can extend C1. There could be another class E1 can extend D1, right? Like that. So this is what we call it as multi-level inheritance, right? And we can create only object for the last child class, and we can access the properties and methods of all the other child classes, right? Parent classes. So using this object of the least or last child class, right? So we created, if you observe, this is what we need to observe. So we created object, only one object. Even though we had three classes here, we are able to access all the variables and methods of all those classes by creating only object for one class, right? We were able to uh, access the variables and methods of all the classes by creating object for one class. So this we were able to achieve using the concept called inheritance. And to use the concept inheritance, we use the keyword called extends B1, right? Extend B1, extends A1, like this. So this is what we called as multi-level inheritance. So let's see, this is just a demo. So we will see one example on this. I'll call it as multi-level inheritance example. Say for example, I have a class called animal. I'll just define the type as, I'll just say, this is some general animal. We'll have the method as some property, like its method as some eat, right? Every animals eat food, right? This is my base class, or we can call it as parent class. Now I'll have a class called dog, which is extending the properties of animal. Dog is an animal, right? So dog extends animal, and it will have its own properties, like it could have some breed, and it can have its own methods. Dogs bark, right? So we'll just mention something like this. Dog barks. So dog is extending animal class here, right? And it has its own properties and it has its own method, right? Now we'll have another class defined. So we call this as derived class, right? And another class. Now this class has to inherit the properties of dog. So it will be something called its puppy. And it should have its own properties. What properties it can have? Say for example, it's a puppy, right? So let's have some age as 1 year like that. And then what can it can do? It can have its own property called play, like this, right? So we do have three classes now. So base class is an animal, and derived class is dog, which is extending animal class. And there is another class called this, we can call it as further derived class, right? All right. So this is further derived class, puppy, which is extending dog, meaning it is indirectly inheriting animal as well. So this is what we call it as multi-level. Now we wanted to, create the object of puppy. That's it. So puppy, you can say new puppy, and then we can call the methods, and we can access the variables of both the dog and animal classes here, right? So let's do that. Puppy dot type. So type is is you can also see here. It gives you the class name as well. Age is an int variable which is from puppy class. Breed is a string type which is from dog class, and type is a string. String data type or object, and animal is and it is present in the animal class is what it is showing, right? And I wanted to access uh, animal class variable here called type, right? So this is inherited from animal. Puppy dot breed. Even this is accessible as it is inheriting as puppy is inheriting dog, right? So this is inherited from dog, and it has its own property called age, right? This is directly defined in puppy. These are all about the variables. Now let us call the methods. So it is a method which is present in superclass, right? So animal, and this can bark as well. From its parent, it got this method. This is its own method, right? So this it inherited from animal, bark it inherited from dog, and this is defined in puppy, right? So now let us see. Yeah, you can see it's a general animal, or you know, if you want, you can also include something like this for more readability. This is type, right? So this is type, this is breed, this is age. Yeah, you can see type as general animal, breed, and age, and also you can see it is calling all the methods. It is able to access all the methods of its parents class, right? So what did we do here? We had an animal class, which is a base class, and dog class, which is inheriting the properties of animal class, and puppy is another class, which is extending properties of dog class. So indirectly, it will get the access to animal properties as well, right? So this is the reason we are creating an object of puppy, and then we are able to access all the parent class properties, and also we are able to call the using grandchild object. We can say, let's say this is further derived class, right? So using this class, we are able to access all the parent class methods, right? So this is all about the multi-level inheritance. This is all about multi-level inheritance, right? Now let us understand the third type. So let's go to the third type called hierarchical inheritance. So for that, let us create another class. I'll just call it as hierarchical inheritance. This is hierarchical inheritance. So this in this inheritance, we'll have more, one parent class inherited by more than one child class, right? So where we can have it something like this. Again, I'm gonna have the animal class, but okay, animal class is already there, right? So I'll just rename it as animal one, something like that, and then so we can get it from here, or let's understand it first with with a small example. Then we'll take the demo, right? So for now, I'll just leave it like this. So first we'll actually take a demo. Like I'll call this as parent. We'll take the example later. First, we'll understand with small example how it works, right? So here we'll have display method. Now I'm not taking variables. I'll pass this to the method when we are creating the object, right? So this is one class, and then I can have a child class. I'll just call it as my child one, which extends the parent class, which extends the parent class, right? And it will have its own method called show. We'll pass some variable to it. And in the same way, we'll have another class, child, we'll call that as child 2, which is actually extending the same parent, right? It is also extending the same parent, and it has its own method, right? So three classes, one parent and two childs. So two childs, child 1 and child 2 are extending the same parent. So this is what we call it as hierarchical hierarchical inheritance demo, right? So this is hierarchical inheritance. One parent having two childs. So two childs are extending the same parent, right? And it has its own properties again. Now we can create, we can create objects for two child classes. So two child classes. This child class is inheriting parent, and the other child is also inheriting the same parent. So this child and this child doesn't know about each other, but both are actually inheriting the same parent. You can say c1 dot display and pass some value here. And c1 dot show. So display is not the method of child one, if you observe. It's a method of parent, right? And show is its own method, right? So we can see the output here. In the same way, child 2 can, we can create an object for child 2. And child 2 can access display method and its own method called print. This is C2. C2 can access display method and also its own method called print. So child C2 equal to new child C2. So it is saying change type is cannot convert from child. Okay, this is of child 2, right? So child C2, new child C2, right? So it will have the properties of parent and as well as child, right? We can have something like this. Yeah, if you observe, we got an output, right? 10 and 20. So this is because, so one method is display method, which this child one is getting from its parent as it is extending the parent, and its own method show. So this is fine, right? And same is the case for child 2 as well. Child 2 is also inheriting the same parent called parent, and it has its own method. So we use that method. Along with that, we are able to access the method of its parent called display, right? So this is all about no, hierarchical inheritance. So this is hierarchical inheritance. Now we'll see an example, on this. So this is just a demo, right? So we'll see an example on this. Where we'll use the same class, animal class. I can copy this class from here. So we'll have an animal class, and then so animal is already there. So we'll just say animal one, right? And then I'll have class dog. Dog is also already there. So I'll just rename it to dog one. Extends animal, right? Now it has its own breed and its own property called bark. Right? So this is hierarchical inheritance. So we'll have one more class which extends the same parent class. And we can have some property to it, some own property to it. Like let's say for example, it's white, right? And cat will have its own method. We'll just say sound or something like this. Okay. So both cat and dog are animals, right? So both are inheriting the animal class properties. This should be animal one. Now we can create objects for both dog and cat because both dog is inheriting animal and cat is also inheriting animal, right? So we'll create an object for cat as well. Now we'll call the methods for dog, dog first, okay? Dog dot type, and dog will have the access to breed as well, its own variable, right? So in the same way, it can actually call the animal method as well as its own method, because dog here is acquiring the properties of animal, right? Animal one. So we created an object for dog one here, right? So this is the reason it is able to access the properties of its own and also properties of animal one. Same goes for cat as well. So cat is also inheriting the properties of animal. So this is the reason we are able to access type here, right? Its own method or its own variable, and then its own methods. So this is the method of animal as it is inheriting the method, as it is inheriting parent class called animal, right? Its own method. Yeah, you can see here general animal, and then or you can just to separate, we can include like that, and you can see here. So this is the dog properties, right? It's a general animal, and its breed, and this is coming from animal, and this is the own property of dog. Same goes for cat as well, right? So general, it is coming from animal, its own property, and then this is coming from animal class, and this is coming from its own method called mews, right? So this is the example of hierarchical inheritance, right? So is that clear till now? And here we can have n number of subclasses. So we had only two classes which are inheriting parent class, right? So you can have more than one, more than two classes as well. We are just taking two as an example here. All right. So this is clear till now, right? All right. Now let's go back. Now let us understand about the multiple inheritance. Till now it is very straightforward, right? So we do have three types of inheritance: single class, where single inheritance, where we do have two classes, one parent class, one child class inherits the properties of parent class, and multi-level, we have seen it can have parent class, child class, and child class inheriting parent class, then grandchild, which is inheriting child class, and then again great grandchild, which is inheriting the properties of grandchild. So and so on. It can go on so on, right? That's we call it as multi-level. And what hierarchical is? So uh, we have one parent and multiple child classes, right? So that is what we call it as hierarchical inheritance. Now let us see multiple inheritance. So we said multiple inheritance is not supported by Java. So we will see now why it is not supported for Java using classes. So say for example, I had two classes. Say for example, I had two classes like this. What does multiple inheritance say? Acquiring the properties from more than one parent, right? So say it as C1. This is C1, and say for example, this is C2, right? And we have a child class called C3. Now, when we wanted to acquire this is what we mean by multiple inheritance using classes, right? So all these are classes now. Now, if you observe, so say for example, I had some method in C1, say called, uh, say for example, my method name is yum. right? There is a method called m, and I have the same method in class 2 as well as, which is called m, right? So and C3 is one class which is inheriting. Say, for example, it is extending both the classes C1 and C2. C3 is one child class which is trying to extend two classes C1 and C2. So now what happens? So whether so this C3 has to acquire the properties of C1 and C2, but you have same method name, right? M and M. So how do we differentiate here? So which copy of M1 has to be present in C3? We definitely know we can't have two methods with the same name, right? So C3 will have its own methods anyway, but C, say for example, it has to inherit the properties of C1 and C2 now, as this is multiple inheritance. So both classes have the same name. So there will be some ambiguity, right? So we can't have two methods with the same name. Say for example, the same signature, method M with same number of parameters, same data type, and same order as well. So in that case, we call the two methods as identical methods, right? So two identical methods in two classes, and we are trying to extend two classes, one child, right? So what happens here? That will be an ambiguity, right? That's an ambiguity here. So from which child this C3 has to inherit the method from? That's an ambiguity, right? So this is one reason. Say for example, I don't have the identical methods. So in C1 and C2, maybe I had like this is not M1. Say for example, this is not M1, but it is just like, this is not M1. Okay. We had only M1. This is not M, but it's only M1. And C2, we had M2. Now, we have no conflict, right? Say, for example, we take care of that we don't have the identical methods in the two classes. This has M1 and this has M2. No, there is no problem, right? C3 should be able to inherit both C1 and C2, but still it can't actually inherit the C1 and C2, two parents. So this is because there is a method called object in Java. So this is because there is one more problem here. So it can't still inherit two parents. So C3, which is a child class, can't inherit more than one parent. So in this case, C1 and C2, though it has different methods, right? Different methods, right? Right. So different methods in the sense, two methods with different names, right? So still it can't inherit in this case. This is because we have we, we have an object, we have a class called in Java, which is called as an object class. So the class name itself is object. So you should not get confused with this with the object which we usually create, right? So there is a class called object. So which is a predefined class in Java. Like the other day we were discussing about class system, right? So there is a class called system, right? If you remember, which is a predefined class in Java. Like that, we do have a class called object. So the class name itself is called object, right? So it is defined like something like this, class object. We didn't define this. Java defines. Java has it in its default package, and we can see here the class name itself is object. So you should not get confused with this with the object which we usually create, right, in the main method. So that this is not that object. So the object object, right, O being in uppercase, is a class name, in Java. And this class name, this is inherited by all the classes by default. So even though you don't see this, so any class where whenever you write a class, whenever you create a class in Java, all the classes implicitly inherits the object class, even though you do not specify the extends keyword. So any class, right? Any class in Java by default implicitly inherits object class. So this is very important. So you'll get a direct question in interviews asking why multiple inheritance in Java is not supported using classes, because any class in Java implicitly inherits object class. So even though you do not specify extends keyword, so it implicitly or automatically, you can say, it is inheriting the class called object. And object, what it is? It's a class name which is present in Java, like it's a predefined class, and any class, every class you create, so implicitly, even though you do not specify extends keyword, implicitly it extends the object class. So, and again, like object class will have its own methods, right? So object class has its own methods. Like, it has its own methods like equals hash code. We'll see that equals is one method, hash code, like this, and so on, right? So now again, like it becomes an ambiguity now, right? So each as equals and hash code or all and so on, right? So there are some methods within object defined. So as each class is inherently so implicitly inheriting this object method. So what happens now? This equals and hash code. Say for example, only these two methods are present in class object. So what should happen now? This equals and hash code are already present in C1 and C2, as C1 and C2 or any other class is inheriting object class. So equals and hash code are already present in C1 and C2 as well. So this copy is already present here. Equals is there, equals and hash code is there here in C1 and C2, right? So even though you don't have the user-defined methods with the same name, there are already two methods, at least two methods, equals and hash code, which are already present in C1 and C2. Now again, this becomes an ambiguity. So we again come to the first problem, right? So where we have the same method names and we wanted to inherit by the same child class. So two parent class having same methods now. As even though it doesn't, we did not define these methods by manually or user defined methods. So these are coming from the parent class, object class, which is implicitly inherited by any class in Java. So we do have the copy of equals and hash code in C1. The same methods we do have in the class called C2. Now what happens? C3 wants to inherit it wants to inherit more than one parent. So when it tries to do that, it is again an ambiguity. So from which method it has to, from which class it has to have this equals and hash code? It can't have it, right? So it can't actually have this methods inherited because it doesn't know which equals or hash code method it has to inherit from. Because both the classes which it is trying to inherit has two methods, equals and hash code equally, right? So it can't actually resolve this ambiguity, which class it has to get this method from, right? So these are the this is the main reason why multiple inheritance is not supported in Java using classes. So we do have another concept called interfaces where we can achieve this concept. So we can have multiple interfaces, right? We can have multiple interfaces where we can have one child interface which can actually or one child class which can inherit more than one interface. That we will see in the coming sessions, right? So for now, what we have to remember is multiple inheritance in Java is not supported using classes because this is the reason. So every class in Java implicitly inherits a class called object, and object is a class which is a predefined class in Java. And as it will have its own methods, we'll see that in action now. I'll also show you that what are all the methods by a class, right? So which actually is inherited by object class, right? So each class implicitly inherits object class. So all the methods which are defined in object class will also be visible to all the classes. So here in this case, every class will have its own copy of the methods of object class. And when we are trying to have a child class and try to extend more than one parent class, so every class will have its own copy of these methods of object class. So there will again be an ambiguity of the child class from which it has to get these methods from, right? So this is the reason multiple inheritance is not supported in Java by using classes. So whereas multiple inheritance is supported in Java using interfaces, right? So how we are going to do this? We are going to see that in the coming sessions. But for now, using classes, multiple inheritance is not supported by Java. So this you have to remember. Is that clear? All right. No. Sure. Okay. I'll show you an example. Say, for example, I have some class called X, right? I have some class called X. I have some other class called Y. I'm not going to define anything for now. So just observe now. So I'll create an object of X class. Say, for example, X class, and I'm going to have an object for Y class as well, right? Now, observe. So if you see here, so this is an object, right? X dot. If I say X dot, so see, X doesn't have any methods. Intentionally, we did not define any methods. Y also, we did not define any methods. Let's say, for example, take only X now, for now, right? X is one class. I have created an object for X class. So we don't have any methods in it. And if you see, I'm not extending any class here for X. But still, you see, X has some methods here. So you can clearly see equals, get class, hash code, notify all, toString, wait method is even overloaded, right? So you can see all these methods in the in this object, right? So how did this object get all these methods? Because all these methods which you are seeing are defined within a class called object. So a class called object is a predefined class in Java, which has all these methods defined in it. And any class in Java is implicitly inheriting this class called object in Java. This is the reason, even though you don't see extends object, so you don't see extends object here, but still see you don't even get an error here. So it is from java.lang.package, java.lang package, and it's there, right? So this is the reason. And again, you don't need to do this. This is already done. Even it is not visible to you, but it's already implicitly done, right? So any class in Java is implicitly inheriting class called object, and object has its own methods. So see like this, equals hash code get class like this, and so this is the reason, like again, like y here also will have this own properties. Like see, when I say y dot, so even though doesn't have any methods here defined, right? You can clearly see that, but still it has visibility to all these methods because y is also inheriting the properties of a class called object. So this is the reason in our case, like again, go back to this diagram, right? So object, it is in this C1 and C2 in our case are X and Y. So now if we wanted to have a defined class called Z and try to inherit an X and Y, so then it is not possible. So with this conclusion, like we can derive something called like one class in Java can inherit only one class, max, right? So we can use the keyword extend only once. At max, in Java, one class can inherit only one class. So object is an exception to that. Object class, we are doing that. We are not doing that. That is implicitly done by Java. So that's an exception, and that's by default. But whatever we define, whatever classes we define, that we can't extend more than one to one child, right? We can extend more than one interface that we'll see in the coming session, but we can't extend more than one class. We can't extend more than one class in Java to the child class. Is not supported. Right? You can use extend one, right? So this is all about like why multiple inheritance is not supported in Java. Hope this is clear. All right. So now uh, we'll understand about main method. So this is the actual syntax of main method, right? Till now we were actually trying to, you know, uh, we were actually calling this method public static void main and string arc like this, right? So let's understand the meaning of this now. So main is the main method name, right? This we understood. String is parameters, right? So string is a parameter to main method. String is an object we know, and arcs, and we have this square braces, meaning so this is a string array, right? So this is a string array. We understood this. Now even static we know. So static is a keyword which we understood in the last session that so static is a keyword where we don't need to. So we define methods like the common methods across the object. So we have a class and we have the methods, right? So if we think that the class or the method or the variables which are common for all the objects, then we define them as the static. Then without using the object, without creating the object for that class, we can access those variables or those methods. This we know, right? So but how do we do that outside of the class? We do it using the class name, right? Using the class name dot, we can call this methods, right? So in the same way, like this is one special method in Java which JVM identifies and will start the execution from, right? So we know static. So why this is static is so JVM has to call the main method, right? So it has to be visible. It has to be visible, and to it has we don't JVM should not be able to create the object for it, but it should be able to access it directly. So it can directly access the main method as this is static, as there is static. The main is a static method. JVM can directly call the main method without creating the object. And what is public here? Public is an access modifier. So public is an access modifier here. What is we mean by that is it actually gives you the visibility. It actually tells you the visibility or the scope. Say for example, so you you have something called, you know, you'll have something called class, right? So this is at the class level, and class is within the package, and package is within the project, right? So this is the hierarchy, right? This is the hierarchy we have, right? So this is the class, and this is the so this is the class, right? And this is the package. Classes are present in packages, right? And packages are present in projects. So when you say public to any method or variable, that is visible at the project level. At the project level, so you can use it in any class, in any package if we actually mention the variable or the method as public, right? So main method is public here, right? So we have another things called like default and protected as well. So we'll see the other class, other access modifiers in the coming sessions. But for now, we know private, right? So private we already learned. So private is like when we define a method or a variable as private, so that is visible only within the class. So outside of the class, we can't actually access the private variables or private methods. This we have seen. This is the reason what we do usually we define the variables as private, and we will use them in the methods, in class methods, and we'll have methods as public, and then we can access the variables through methods as the methods are public, and within the methods of the same class we'll have some variables which are private variables, and we actually call those methods to interact with the variables in that class. This we have already seen as part of encapsulation, right? Now, so in the same way, like when we have this access modifier as public for any method or variable, then the scope of that is across the project. Across the project in the sense, it can be used in any other package. Anyway, package in the sense like class also, right? So in any class or in any package, we can use this public method or public variable. And how do we actually declare it? So we just need to have it before the method name like this, right? So now I think you have good understanding of main method. So main is a method name. So public is an access modifier, and you know static. So static, why it is static? It can be directly called by JVM without without creating object, because JVM has to have the access for the main method to start the execution from, right? Without creating object, JVM can call, right? So this is the reason main method is static. And why it is public? So public, if it is public, then JVM can call it from any, so it is public, right? So it is accessible from anywhere. So JVM can directly call it, or else it will be restricted to, so only some packages, some classes, right? If we use other access modifiers. So this is the reason main method was declared as public. So if it is public, it is accessible from anywhere, from, right? So within the project, right? So this is the reason we had main as public, and static because we don't need to, so JVM don't need to create the object to call it, right? It can directly call it with the class name dot main method, right? And we already said like main method can be one method. So in one class, you can have only one method with the same signature, with this signature in the sense with the same like return type, right? And the same arguments. So public static, and what is void? Why void? So no return, no return type. Main method returns nothing. That's the reason main was defined as void, right? And string args. Main we know, main is a method name, right? It's like a signature. And string, what do you mean by string args? So this is a string type array. This is a string type array, right? Which can accept the arguments. This is optional. We can pass the arguments or we do not, right? But string is a string type, main method accepts the string type array. So this is the meaning of public static void main, and it accepting the string array parameters, right? So we can write it like this, or we can even, this is the valid one. We have seen this in multiple examples, right? So this is valid. And we can even interchange this. And this arcs, we can have it like any other way. Like this need not be the same name. So this is just an object name, right? It is string. It is an array name, right? So we can have it something like this, even XYZ as well, right? And also this is also valid. And we can even have the square braces like that, like this. We have learned this when we are discussing about the arrays, right? So even this is valid. But you can't, and how about the order of this? So we can have it like this. Say for example, void main, and we can't have it something like this. So say for example, this public static, I wanted to have it as somewhere else after the main method like this. So this is not valid. So this is invalid. You can't do like that. And say for example, I'll just say this as an integer, right? So can I do like this? Even this is invalid because string will only accept the string as an array. Because why it accepts only string as an array is there is a reason again behind that, right? So say for example, I have something called, you know, say for example, I have some string, right? Some string called Java, right? So can this be converted into integer? So can Java, will this have an equivalent to integer? No, right? So can this have an equivalent, this is a char, right? So can this have an equivalent integer? No, right? So this is the reason we can't have it as integer. But say for example, I have something called like this, a equal to 10, right? Say for example, double d equal to something like this, right? But still this can be converted into string. Say for example, I can have it something like this, right? I can convert int to string like this. In the same way, we can even convert the double as well. Say, for example, I can do it something like this. Still, this is valid. String can accept the number, right? So we enclose it in double quotes, and whatever you give it, so that takes that as a value of the string, right? So this is valid. But if you have the string and if you wanted to convert it into int, that is not possible. So how do you convert this Java to some integer, right? Some this grade, some character type to integer. You can't do that, right? So this is the reason if it is string array, then we can convert all these numbers, right? So these numbers also into an array, into string array, right? This number also can be converted into the string array. This is the reason it is defined as string array. Parameters can you accept it as string type array, right? And we can interchange this, but so this was not possible is what we said, right? So void main public static, but what you can do is this is valid. You can interchange this static and public like this. This is valid. Can we do like this? So I wanted to have static here. All these you can experiment when you're writing, when you're practicing it, right? So you can experiment what's the valid. So if it is valid, you will not get an error, any error. If it is invalid, you'll get a syntax error, right? So that's how you can explore it. See, I have given another combination here. So static before the main, but this is invalid because so return type should always be just before the main method like this. So main, and it is returning nothing, right? So the return type should be just before the main method like this void, right? So it should not be like, just so just before the main method, it should have the return type. But here we have written static, which is invalid, right? So this is valid again, static and public. This can be interchanged like this. This is valid, right? So like this, you can explore like what are all the valid syntaxes. I have given some, but you can try other combinations as well, right? So this is all about the meaning of public static void main. Again, an important interview question. So they'll ask you to write the syntax or the main method signature, and we'll ask you to explain the meaning of it. Why main is static? Why main is public? Like that, right? Why main is accepting only string type array like that. So is that clear? Is that clear? All right. So in this session, what did we discuss? We started with inheritance. We understood the definition of inheritance, and we have also seen what are all the types of inheritance supported by Java, and we have understood with the examples, and we have seen why multiple inheritance is not supported in Java using classes, and also like yeah, we have seen this. So we have seen the reasons why multiple inheritance is not supported by Java using classes, and also we have understood the meaning of main method. So this all we have learned, and yeah, if you have any questions in this topic, whatever we discussed, you can ask now. I'm stopping here.